the thought of, I'm going to love my kids and they're going to love me back. And we're going to have this wonderfully pleasant, supportive, and warm learning climate. Unfortunately, I needed skills to go along with that. And other folks are told, don't smile until Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, one of the winter holidays. Be cold until it gets cold. And while they may be able to exert control versus management over a large number of kids, we haven't won them over at the level of the heart. And we're not making them enthusiastic and motivated to engage with us. So classroom management is the linchpin skill of teaching. Nothing else productive happens in the classroom if we aren't able to be the captain of that classroom. Without that linchpin, everything falls apart. Excellence in instruction is important, it's essential, but that's not all. It's not all that suffices. Perhaps in your groups, you consider, well, when do we start behavior management? And yes, we actually engage in it. We actually implement it on day one. But as those of you who are out there teaching, and those of you who experience student teaching, and those of you who have been in the classroom as paraprofessionals or volunteers, know that there's a lot of planning that goes on in the days and weeks ahead of time. And then what exactly are we trying to achieve by setting up all these behavior management procedures and rules and learning interventions? What are we trying to accomplish? And why don't we use our chat room right now for folks to write in, well, okay, I'm in a class on classroom and behavior management, but why? What do I hope to accomplish with what it is that we'll be learning here? So take a moment, if you would. What is your ultimate goal?
Create a positive and productive learning environment for all.
Indeed, yeah.
Safe, inclusive environments where students take academic and social risks. Classroom,
Right.
everyone can learn.
Yeah, where kids feel safe, not just physically safe, but emotionally safe. No one will make comments that are condescending or embarrassing to that person. Intellectually safe, so that the youngster can offer an answer without the fear of hearing, oh, that's a stupid thing to say from the peers.
So finding strategies to have kids listen to me.
That's right. It allows us to teach and kids to learn.
Yeah, so active learning. Students are excited. Safe and nurturing comes up again. I think we got about 10 of those. Managing larger groups is tough, right?
And so many of these comments that are being entered have to do with the relationship between teachers and students. How do I motivate them, give them a sense of belonging and comfort, that it's okay to make mistakes and challenge yourself and do your best? So thank you very much for those contributions, folks. And these are some of the commonly reported ones. You'll see it in your textbook that we'll talk about a little bit later, and you'll see it in other places, that we want to help the kids develop study habits, learn how to think in an academic problem-solving manner. We want to be sure that they progress in their learning because, gosh, nothing's more demoralizing than seeing others succeed at something while you're not able to accomplish that. We want to develop that love of learning, that, oh, I got to do it for the points, I got to do it for the grade, I got to do it to avoid being, having to leave the classroom. But that the kids say, I like this, this is challenging me. It's a little bit it's on the edge of what it is I'm able to do, and I see myself moving forward. And of course, as many of you mentioned, we want to create socially acceptable group behavior, pro-social, acceptable within a group actions. And not just because we're watching them and there's a penalty if you don't comply, but rather helping them become self-regulated, self-motivated, able to look inside themselves and say, am I doing the right thing at this moment? So, well, why don't you enter in the chat room now, if you would? What reasons have you heard for why kids misbehave in school? When teachers say, why does that kid keep doing that? Let's add to this list that you're seeing develop on your screen. What are some of the reasons that kids...
Unmet needs, home environment, bad day at home, struggling with academics, self-esteem, not being heard, struggling with the work they're doing, trauma, frustration, trauma again, don't understand, frustrated with the material, unclear expectations, bored, disability, trying to communicate something, not able to express themselves, physical discomfort, embarrassment, taking care
of. Spot on. And it's quite a list, and quite a comprehensive list.
Yeah.
Always more to add, but so why do they misbehave in school? Well, some of the commonly reported ones, in fact, reported here this evening. Upset with the actions of somebody nearby. Maybe they didn't know what the expectations were, didn't fully understand the rules. Maybe there's some sensory issues involved, and this kid has to move or feels the need to move. Trying to maintain or improve your image among peers. Those of you in the adolescent special ed, you were especially familiar with this. I mean, think of all the things that you did in your life to belong. That strata in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the need to be connected with others, to feel like you're a valued member of a group, to be respected by that group, to perhaps rise within that group. Think of the clothes you wore, the music you listened to, the statements you agreed with verbally, even though you didn't agree with them up here, because I want to be connected. I want to belong to this person or that group. That a lot of behaviors are what we refer to as defensive behaviors, protecting one's self-image. When the kid rips up the paper and throws it on the ground and says, I ain't doing this baby crap. It might have been that this youngster looked at it and said, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. And I'm not going to have my self-esteem suffer further. I'm not going to take the chance of others laughing at it or the teacher chastising what I've done. We had mentioned childhood trauma, or what is becoming known as adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and that when kids have received childhood trauma, they tend to be on guard, to have a high level of expecting a threat to happen at any moment. And when a perceived threat, something that might be innocuous to us, but sparks a memory for that youngster, we see the fight, flight, or freeze responses to protect oneself. Or ensuring safety by identifying with the power figures in the classroom. We might have a youngster who says, teacher, I would love to learn from you. I enjoy this subject matter. I think you're a wonderful teacher, but if you want to know who's really in charge here, it's those 3 kids in the back. They are making your life miserable. They are victimizing you. If I do everything you ask, then I am your follower, and I set myself up for victimization. I'm sorry, teacher, I have to laugh at their jokes. I have to engage in the behaviors they engage in for my own self-protection. But most often, our youngsters, we can categorize it into one of two areas. Either they're trying to obtain something they desire, attention, privilege, power, peer status, what we call positive reinforcement, things we view positively, or escape something perceived to be awful, an embarrassing situation, failure, what we know as negative reinforcement. That is a negative thing. I engage in a behavior to make that negative thing go away. It feels good not to avoid punishment or not be punished. That negative thing has been avoided. I've been reinforced. Negative reinforcement. But then the question comes up, should we even consider the reason for misbehavior? I've had some colleagues who used to say, excuses are like armpits. Everybody's got them, and they all stink. No excuses. That one at the bottom corner, the excuse limit 0, that is in my kid's middle school. I happen to know some of the administrators there. We've talked about it, but they say, well, excuses are false ones that don't really apply. But should we accept the reason for misbehavior? Well, yes, we have to. Our federal decree, our federal policy from the U.S. Department of Education states that when we are concerned about a youngster's behavior, very concerned about it, that we must conduct an FBA, a functional behavior assessment. We have to figure out what is the function, the purpose, the drive, the reason behind that behavior. Because we have to know the reason if we're going to devise interventions that meet that need as we teach behaviors that are more socially acceptable to meet that need. So, realizing that we don't have any magical pixie dust to sprinkle on behavioral situations, and we don't have any Harry Potter incantations that we can chant to make misbehavior go away. But in the chat room, enter some of the things you've heard about that work most of the time with most of the kids. What's some of the advice you've been told? What have you learned from your readings, from your videos, from your experience? What should be in our behavior management toolkit? What have you heard? Sean, anything coming in?
Hold on one second. Let's see. Parent engagement, concrete boundaries, stating clear expectations, positive reinforcement, clear rules. Prevention, setting clear expectations, positive reinforcement, relationships, clear routines and expectations, consistency, setting rules right from the start, positive reinforcement, such as telling the student why it's good to listen, getting to know your students, relationships, personalized lessons, setting rules and also reviewing them, non-punitive conversation, learning from your students, routines and expectations, calm corners, restorative justice.
All right, well, I think we have a bunch of people who could teach this course, so maybe we just end the session and give everybody an A, Sean. I mean, we have some sage advice coming in on this chat room, and I'm looking forward to reviewing it more in depth a little bit later. Super.
Oh, I like this one. Observe over an extended period of time in different environments.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are so many ideas and practices and things that we can do in the moment or to prevent or to respond. But if we're looking to create, which we are, of course, an orchestrated safe classroom where the kids feel like they belong and they're respected and they feel comfortable there, and one there where they're engaged, they're on the task that's being assigned, we can separate these into 4 areas of classroom management. The first being how we organize the classroom. And in previous semesters, and this semester, of course, we'll talk about the physical classroom in the school. You see on the top there with the flag that this teacher has the youngsters engage in group lessons, table talk, the peers are interacting, where on the other side, we see the desks are separated. We find different benefits to these different arrangements. For example, the one research has shown that when you separate the desks and the kids work independently, that they tend to be more on task. However, they're not learning from their peers. They're not sharing it. They're not taking it to a different level, which is done in the classroom where it shows the flag. Now, this semester, we'll be adding a few readings or videos regarding, well, what if the classroom looks different now? We need that spacing between the kids. And unlike this particular classroom, the youngsters may be wearing masks at all times. Or it may be that our classroom is online. We've got the virtual classroom. And how do we manage the behavior of youngsters to be sure that they are engaged, behaving appropriately, showing some etiquette? So that's an area we'll spend time on, along with routines, where the Grand Master of Classroom Behavior Management, Harry Wong, the most popular speaker at conferences, you better book him about three years in advance. And in his very popular best-selling book, The First Days of School, he mentions that, the number one problem in the classroom is not discipline. It's a lack of procedures and routines. He's not talking about discipline in teachers. He's talking about having a structure for the youngsters, and that we can prevent a lot of misbehavior. And the behavior we prevent is the one that we want to promote, the behavior we never see. And he says a lot of misbehavior can be prevented by having routines for recurring events. So what are some of the recurring events where we could implement routines? We could task analyze that recurring event and then teach it to our kids. Okay, when we do this every day at the end of class, this is how we will do it. And we have them practice it. We have them create skits and display it. Okay? So in the chat room, enter some of the recurring activities for which it makes sense to develop procedures.
Dr. Mack, somebody had a question too, so let me go back to it after I say some of these. Greeting students at the door, unpacking, packing up, morning routine, handing out papers, pack up, transitions, breakout groups, journaling, transitioning between activities, transitions.
We've got it walking down the hallway, submitting homework, handing in papers, how to approach the teacher if you have a question. Yep.
Yeah. The question that came up is, what is the 80/15/5 rule?
Oh, yeah, that's something that's been around since the beginning of time, and I remember hearing it at that point. That any one procedure, any one intervention, any one thing you try will work really well with 80% of the kids. It'll work fairly well with about 15% of the kids. not going to work at all with 5% of your kids, which is why we have to keep developing our skill in this area, always picking up new tips and techniques, because our go-to response, our go-to intervention, our go-to way of handling situations is going to work really well with 80% of our kids. It'll have an effect, perhaps a little delayed. Perhaps we won't get exactly the behavior we're looking for in 15% of the kids, and then 5% of our kids aren't going to respond at all. So we need a wide array of interventions and strategies. Keep putting more behavior management arrows in our quiver.
Okay, great. So some visual aids, charts, classroom rules. Don't use the word no. Instead, use positive, measurable, observable phrases. Having students jot down things, being active listeners, using my hand, doing verbal signs. Great stuff.
All right. Thank you very much, folks. I tell you, I'm enjoying this and looking forward to digging deeper into our chat room tomorrow. So we talked about having our rules and our routines and setting up the structure, but also how we teach. We have a whole module, a learning module on our Blackboard site about managing the behavior with the way we teach. And we'll go back to one of the pioneers in this area, Jacob Koonin, and we'll talk about some of his strategies that are just, you want to incorporate it into your teaching style because it helps to captivate kids. We have to be excited about teaching if we expect kids to be excited about learning. And we can convey that excitement and that confidence when we work on our teaching style aspects of it that help kids to attend and engage actively. Some of the things that we will be reading about and also viewing on some videos in the teaching style modules. Oh, we also have a module on how to phrase our comments and directions to enhance the chances of kids complying and cooperating. So we have a whole unit, a whole module on that. And of course, we're special educators. So what do special educators do? We differentiate. And the guidelines for differentiation are found in UDL, which we all know as, yes, the Universal Design for Learning. Most of us, all of us, I guess, are familiar with UDL, Universal Design for Learning, as it applies to construction. That, gee, those curb cuts that we see for people in wheelchairs, gee, they benefit seniors who are frail or walking with a cane. Those curb cuts benefit parents who are pushing strollers. Think about the levers that we see on doors. While they're meant for people who would have difficulty with the rotary motion of the wrist, it benefits me when I come in with an armload of groceries and I can give a butt cheek to the lever and open the door. And so when we apply it to cognition and we apply it to learning, there are three areas that we differentiate. How we present it to the youngster, how we allow them to show their learning, how we assess their learning, and how do we motivate these kids to fully engage in our differentiated presentation, demonstration, learning. You see two websites down there at the bottom where you can find out more about UDL and all the modifications that you could make within these three categories, these three areas. You'll find that there are a whole lot of strategies for the first two. How to present the material in a way that reaches that youngster, and how to allow them to demonstrate their learning differently. Unfortunately, they're a little bit shy of numbers in the motivation section. But hey, in SPED 702, that's our whole focus. And so you'll pick up a whole lot of ideas for the third component, motivating kids to try their best. The third of the four is student-teacher relationships. Is there a connection? Well, yes, you already knew that, and the research is proving that we need to like, respect, and admire the person who's in front of us if we are going to put forth our best. You got to like the messenger if you're going to listen to the message. So we work on building student-teacher relationships. We have learning modules that will complement you on the things that you're already doing and provide you with some new ideas for building and strengthening our interactions with youngsters. And how we can react and respond to misbehavior in ways that are helpful and supportive. One of the ways that we'll talk about is what's known as symptom separation. When that behavior is irking us, it's keeping us from teaching, it's keeping that kid from learning, it's keeping other kids from learning. Separate the behavior from the youngster. Yes, that behavior must cease and desist. That needs to go away. It should no longer exist in my classroom. And I'm going to work with this youngster to help that youngster detach from that behavior. And we know that teaching behavior is just like teaching academics. We have lessons. We differentiate. Our teaching style matters. But relationships, where the kid says, I'm going to do this because I know you're here for me and you have my best interests at heart. Symptom separation. Separate the behavior from the youngster and teach the youngster, support the youngster in building a new behavior. Something that meets the same emotional or physical, psychological, or intellectual needs, but does so in a pro-social, socially acceptable manner. And then we need our strategies. We need all of those tools in our toolbox, all of those cooking utensils in the cabinet. We need to keep adding to our supply. Again, prevention. We want to think ahead, or if it's happened, how am I going to prevent it from happening in the future, that misbehavior? The behavior we never see is the one we want to promote. And then how do we respond to that behavior? Not emotionally knee-jerk react, but in a thoughtful, reflective, practiced manner. We say, instead of, oh, that kid is making me mad and that kid's going to suffer, and throwing out an emotional firestorm, or else saying, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do right now. We're going to add more strategies to our repertoire. Excuse my French. And we are going to respond versus emotionally react. We'll say, kid in crisis. What does a competent, caring teacher do at this moment? And you're going to leave this course with a whole lot of ideas for responding in those situations. And like we said, we teach replacement behaviors. This behavior, I'm separating the youngster from it, symptoms of separation. This behavior, goodbye. But I'm going to teach you one that will serve your same need for attention, for sensory stimulation, for power, for to meet hunger, whatever it is. We will teach you a new way of responding. So Dr. Turner, At this point, should we field some questions, or do you think that's best to handle in our office hours and as we review the syllabus in a bit?
Yeah, I would say maybe we could take a 5 minute break so you could put. What we're going to do, everybody, is the teachers that are currently teaching in the school are going to go with me, and we're going to look at the syllabus. And those that don't have a full-time teaching position right now are going to break out with Dr. Mack. So we'll go over some of the basic ideas of the syllabus, and then we can field some individual questions, and then there'll be a short survey at the end. But I would say that one thing you'll learn in behavior management is that at a certain point, uh, it's a lot of information to soak in. So I think that in the small groups, you could ask us questions or come back to us during our office hours. Um, yeah, did you? So right, and let me just put up. So while we do that, if you did, I sent a survey at the beginning. If you didn't fill it out, I'll put the link back up real quick. Hold on. Because that's what he's going to use to put us into two groups. So,
And just to reiterate what Dr. Turner has been saying, that those of you who are teachers at the moment will be meeting with Dr. Turner, and I'll be meeting with folks who will be teaching in the future. We will be going over the syllabus and responding to your questions. I will be staying on after this session for anyone who, when the session is over, you can leave the session or you can remain on and we'll talk, we'll chat.
yeah, sounds good. So why don't we? It is 8:18 now.